Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for having me here today. I was telling Max before we began that I have a 16-year-old, a 14-year-old, and a 12-year-old, and they all somehow left for school with my earbuds and my earphones. So apologies if my audio is not coming in well, and I'm not great at reading chats. So if my audio goes in or out, or you need to, I need to do something, please just jump in and tell me. We can be informal like that. But I am Maggie Caspe. I'm a senior research consultant at the National Association for Family, School, and Community Engagement, or NAFSCE, as we like to refer to ourselves. And just to give you a quick note, NAFSCE is a nonprofit association, and our mission is advancing high impact policies and practices for family, school, and community engagement to promote child development and improve student achievement. And our vision is one in which family engagement is universally practiced as an essential strategy for improving children's learning and advancing equity. And I'd like to think about, when I think about what we do at NAFSCE, I think about three things. We support our members through webinars, newsletters, and other opportunities like our National Assembly. We provide technical assistance and training to states here in the US. And we also take on projects that are important to the family and community engagement field. So as Max mentioned, he invited me here today because over the past 5 years, we've really been involved in a large project designed to understand, enhance, and really reimagine how educators are prepared for family and community engagement. So when I was preparing for this talk, I was thinking a little bit about the work we do and thinking about a lot of the stories and anecdotes we often hear. And one chapter from a recent monograph that we wrote often sort of rises to the top for me. And this is a chapter in the book that you see on the screen that was written collaboratively by NAFSCE's Family and Leadership Council. And in that chapter, they really outline what it is that families want educators to know about the work of family and community engagement, and what families want educators to learn throughout their preparation around family and community engagement. And four main themes emerged from their work. They want educators to see families as experts and partners. They want educators to learn how to build authentic relationships. They want educators to be able to support the power and potential of family and community engagement. And most importantly, they want educators who recognize how small things matter. And I think Hayward actually said this best when he wrote, "There are a lot of things I remember from the first teacher that engaged me now, 2 kids and many years later. Even when a parent and family are no longer in an educator's professional care, there are things that a family is going to take away from your interactions that will benefit that family once a family steps away." And sort of this simple idea that the little things matter and small things we do make a big difference really sticks with me. So please keep that in mind as we continue this conversation around the preparation of educators for family and community engagement. So for today's talk, I'm going to be sharing with you 5 trends we've really been seeing in the field of educator preparation and family engagement, and also share resources that you can see on the screen that are available on our website that might be helpful to you as you engage in your own work. And I do want to make just a note that what I'm going to discuss is based mainly on work done here in the US. And what we are learning from conversations with colleagues in other countries is that by and large, the trends we're seeing here are similar to those that exist in other countries as well. But I'm excited to learn more from you all from reading the chat box. There's a lot of expertise in this room that I'm happy to hear and excited to hear more about from. But just a note on our website, we have a great blog from Max, who wrote about teacher education and the family engagement Canadian experience. We have a blog from Beverly Ferguson and Susan Doherty, looking at work on family engagement being done in Scotland. And of course, Debbie Pouchore, who's lovely in here today, some of her work that she's done in Canada as well. So those are exciting resources if you'd like to check them out. And before I get into the trends, just a little bit more table setting here. Just to lay the foundation, when we at NAFSCE and many others in the field, of course, think about family and community engagement, we tend to think about it as a shared responsibility among families, schools, and communities to support student learning. So really in this way, family and community engagement isn't a one-size-fits-all model or program or service, but it's the ways that families are guiding, supporting, and advocating for their children's learning. And conversely, for schools and communities, it's about reaching out to families and creating the conditions for all families to not be subordinate to the school, but really to be critical partners. And everyone here really knows the research points to a number of positive benefits for families and communities and teachers when this work is done well. But the problem of practice that we're really looking to address here today in our work is that despite all we know about the importance of family engagement, family and community engagement is too often at the periphery of school reform efforts and practices. And for those of you who have heard some of our work before, we know that there's a lot of reasons for why this is. But perhaps one of the biggest reasons is that family-facing professionals, and by this we mean school leaders, educators, family coordinators, really anyone who works with families, receive very few opportunities early on or throughout their careers to learn how to partner with families. Data point out again and again that family-facing professionals want to engage families meaningfully and equitably, but just aren't always given those opportunities to really learn and practice what that looks like. And this is problematic, we know, because without that preparation, educators are less likely to engage families and get those outcomes that we know are so important for schools and families and communities. So without further ado, I'm going to share some of the trends that we're seeing in the field. And I'll go through some of the data a little bit quickly. But to start it off, in a survey we conducted 4 years ago with nearly 600 family-facing professionals, many of whom were teachers, we learned that fewer than 40% believe that their pre-service or professional training fully covered the core competencies needed to engage families. Second, when we conducted a national survey of over 150 department heads of educator preparation programs across the country, we found that rarely do educator preparation programs offer classes in family engagement. And specifically in that family engagement topics are really integrated in limited amounts in coursework. And we also know that, so this is just the limited infusion of family engagement coursework into topics. And if this is even less prevalent when we look at topics like STEM and educational leadership. And just a quick policy note, when we reviewed state standards here in the United States, we found that only 30% of US states and territories explicitly address training teachers in the elements essential to effective family engagement in licensure and other state standards. So taken together here in the US and some of the research we've done, we're looking at a picture where educators don't feel very prepared for this work. And educator preparation programs don't perceive family engagement being addressed very robustly, and states aren't really elevating it in their policies really well either. So the next trend I want to point to and sort of highlight is that although preparing educators for family and community engagement might not be fully recognized, we do know really the competencies that educators need to develop to engage families meaningfully and equitably. So we have a good handle on what we hope that educators are learning around family and community engagement. And the thing that we began to build out here at NAFSCE a number of years ago, and you could see on the screen, are our family engagement core competencies. And this report, and you can access this on the NAFSCE website, was really designed to drill down on the core competencies that educators should develop and practice to partner with families and communities. And I know that there are a lot of standards and documents that exist in this area around this topic. But we think what really sets the family engagement core competencies apart is that, these standards that exist are typically aligned to roles within specific fields or placed at the organizational level or specific to particular points in children's development. So the goal of the family core competencies was really to, sort of elevate those core principles that exist across all of those developmental periods and content areas. And I'll go through each of those competency areas a little bit more in depth in a moment. But just to give you an overarching sense of what they are, reflection is about teachers, educators, family-facing professionals looking inward and examining biases and respecting families. Connecting is about teachers building trusting relationships with families and fostering social networks. Collaboration is about teachers linking this work to student learning and social emotional growth. And leading is about teachers standing alongside families for systems change to champion equity. And this is just a quick note on our process. This work was done over a 3-year process, actually, across 6 phases that included convenings of experts, synthesis and literature reviews, verification and vetting with teachers, a crosswalk across professional standards that you could see on the screen, as well as some stakeholder interviews and a large-scale survey. And I'm not going to spend too much time here because this is something that you can access. But just, to give you a sense, when we think about this competency, this domain of reflect, what we're really thinking about here is how educators respect, honor, and value families, the ways they examine the cultural and linguistic diversity of families and communities, and the ways that they explore, understand, and honor with families, how children develop, grow, and change from birth through adulthood across settings, and how these changes affect families. And the second competency within this domain is about family-facing professionals really embracing equity throughout family engagement, looking inward to develop cultural humility, cognitive flexibility, and perspective-taking skills, and really reflecting on how history and social context influences family engagement systems and practices. In the domain of connect, we know that educators who are effective in their work really build trusting, reciprocal relationships with families by cultivating trust, communicating effectively, creating welcoming environments. And we know that educators also foster community partnerships for learning and well-being, and really look to establish systems to leverage community resources in their work. We also know that educators collaborate, and they collaborate when they build upon family knowledge as resources for learning and join together with families for planning, implementing, and evaluating learning opportunities. And we also know that collaboration is really about linking the aspects that we do of engaging families to student learning. So how do we develop data systems that are accessible for all families, create conversations around developmental academic progress? And how do we really bridge out some of those collaborations to co-design services that we offer? And finally, leading alongside families is really about looking at our own leadership and identifying and participating as a member of the family engagement profession, and also really identifying and examining the decision making and the ways and the roles that families are part of the leadership and the champions and advocates for change that exist within the systems and communities in which they live. Which takes us to trend 3. So trend 3, what we really want to highlight here is that preparing educators for family engagement isn't just the role of educator preparation programs alone. We know that it takes partnerships among educator preparation programs, families and communities, schools and districts. And what you're going to see on the screen here is a culminating report from some work we conducted with some key national partners here in the US, a number of universities, and a number of state partners to develop this educator preparation framework for family and community engagement. And this report isn't really a roadmap, but really it's a menu of options that propose new processes and ideas for preparing educators to develop the knowledge, skills, and dispositions that they need to really be successful. And what I'm not going to do is get into the nitty-gritty of this framework now, but suffice to say, you can almost look at this framework as if it's a theory of change or a theory of action. And at its core, what the framework shows on that far left-hand corner is that educator preparation programs alone can't do the work of preparing educators for family and community engagement. Instead, it takes a whole set of partners, including ed prep programs, families, communities, school districts, states. And when these partners work together and pull on various levers like funding, measurement, new methods, reimagining and really championing the importance of this work, what we start to see is short-term change. We start to see enhanced coursework. We start to see improved clinical practices and experiences. We start to see policy and systems change, and we start to see advocacy and mobilization of communities for this work, which really leads to our long-term goals of educators who are prepared for family engagement in ways that it is universally practiced. And I really encourage you to take a look at the framework and the report because it includes a number of case studies from across the US that are really using different permutations of these levers and these outcomes to really do some exciting work. Which is exciting because it also takes us to trend 4. And trend 4 is that really there are a lot of bright spots that we can learn from. I started with trend 1, almost, sort of portraying, there's work that we can do. But I think trend 4 really points to this notion that there's a lot of great work going on. And if we can harness a lot of that work, we could also continue to make really great change in this area. And I'm looking at everybody who's in this room. Sarah and many others are doing that great work on the ground as we speak. But so just to give a little bit of background, when we released our framework, we also said to ourselves, a framework is only as good as people who actually use it. It's not enough to just have a report out there. We need people who are really getting with the report with their hands and doing that, good work of trying it out. So we released in tandem with the framework something called the Family Engagement and Educator Preparation Innovation Project, and we call that FEPIP for short. And the goal of FEPIP was really to engage collaboratives of educator preparation programs, families, schools, and communities, all those people you saw as part of the framework. And we wanted them to come together and try and test out different elements of the framework to see how it went. So we ended up funding nine collaboratives that you could see on the screen from throughout the country. And we gave them modest grants of about $20,000 over a 2-year period to really test out some of the ideas that they wanted to see. And I'm not going to get into all of the findings because they're really nuanced and they're really interesting. But when we look across all 9 projects in aggregate, we start to see that they are really making an impact and really having influence on the educator preparation and family engagement ecosystem. And if you want to see some of the more fine-grained findings of, of the aggregated work of these projects, we have an article published in the Journal of Teacher Education special issue on family and community engagement that outlines our findings. But, I think the 2 that I want to highlight here that are important is that we saw that collaboratives were successful in targeting 4 main areas of educator preparation. They were able to focus on coursework and create opportunities to infuse family engagement topics into coursework. They were able to focus on clinical practice and create opportunities for aspiring teachers to learn from families and communities themselves. They were able to really focus on program redesign and find ways to bring the voices of communities and families into the reconceptualization of programs. And they also started to focus on systems change. And then the second finding that I really want to point out, which is really exciting, is when our collaboratives did this work, they increased pre-service teachers' connection to teaching and confidence and knowledge in connecting with families. They increased practicing teachers' knowledge and capacity for family engagement. They increased faculty competence and knowledge of teaching and family and community engagement. And they increased families and communities' engagement in the educator preparation process. And finally, they also really developed institutions' deeper commitment to preparing educators for working with families and communities. And we're currently analyzing data from the year 2 components of the project. And what we're starting to see is that these projects really worked really hard to create opportunities for sustainability. And what they started to see is that sustainability looks very different in very different contexts. But when the work of educator preparation for family and community is embedded within communities themselves, we start to see some of that, sustainability really take root. So that's something that we're working on now. But just to give you a little bit of a flavor of what some of these projects actually did, related to curriculum, our colleagues from the Pritchard Committee in Kentucky partnered with Morehead University and Eastern Kentucky to develop a set of family engagement modules that could be used not only within 1 or 2 universities, but across the state. And what they found was in a pre-post survey of teacher candidates that by engaging in those modules over the course of a semester, they increased their confidence in working with families. Related to clinical experience, our colleagues from Indiana University in Indianapolis partnered with parent leaders and community schools to utilize the family as faculty approach, in which families were literally teaching courses to the aspiring candidates. And they found that that work improved and grew the social networks, not only of the candidates, but also of the families who participated as well. This is another clinical experience example. Our project led by Missionary Baptist Church in Indiana partnered with Ball State University and members of the Whiteley community, and they enhanced practicing and pre-service teachers' knowledge and appreciation for community cultural wealth through the development of a community teaching fellowship that was led by community members that really welcomed new teachers for their student teaching into the community and gave them books that the community had decided were really important for students to be able to read with their new teachers. Just a close-up on program redesign. Our colleagues from Bank Street here in New York partnered with Head Start programs, which are early childhood programs, and charter schools to hold focus groups for families and teachers and children. And they ended up using the data from those focus groups to help redesign their early childhood special education preparation program to have a stronger focus on families. And finally, in relation to systems change, our colleagues from Michigan State partnered with 5 different districts and universities across the country to engage in a book club where mentor teachers had an opportunity to read cases and discuss what they would do with them and how they would use, these are mentor teachers who are mentoring student teachers coming into their classrooms, and how they would use those case dilemmas to better talk to their aspiring teachers about family and community engagement. So there's really so much great stuff. I encourage you to take a look at the article or take a look at our website. We have a number of webinars that were given by each of these collaboratives that really dig down into the work that they did. So what I'm going to do is very quickly, I'm going to go into trend 5 and then I will stop because I know this is a lot of talking. But my last trend here is that policymakers have an important role to play too. As many of you know, we in the US have a new administration right now that is making some fundamental changes to the structure of our federal government. But one thing we do know is that engaging all families as educational partners is not a partisan issue and is something that's core to our education and our education functions. So supporting the preparation of educators for family and community engagement is really important for promoting quality teacher preparation and just making sure that we have quality schools. So in the report that you see on the screen, we outline just some ways that policymakers can support this work, because when we hear about the barriers that educator preparation programs face in really expanding and amplifying their work in preparing educators for family and community engagement, we often hear lack of standards, lack of it being a requirement is part of the reason it's not such a strong focus. So the 3 recommendations we have in our report is that policymakers can begin to legislate requirements for family engagement throughout educator preparation systems. So legislation can directly promote the development and use in tools and processes to measure and assess engagement outcomes for students in districts. So putting some of those in place. Policymakers can also regulate and administer explicit family engagement requirements throughout educator preparation guidance, policy, and procedures. For example, policymakers might create family engagement, family and community engagement regulatory standards, guidance, and even, create different documents that educator preparation programs can turn to help guide that work. And finally, policymakers can really collaborate with the field to elevate and inspire best practice educator preparation for family engagement. We see a lot of private foundations and others really coming to serve as conveners, communicators, and collaborators for this important work. So, being part of that public-private connection can be important. So those are the sort of the 5 trends I thought it might be fitting to close with a final quote from our book. This quote is from Bianca Scott, who is the head of NAFSCE's Parent Family Leadership Council, who wrote the chapter that I had alluded to at the beginning of this conversation. But her quote always sticks with me as well. And her quote is, "I'm an expert on my kids. I have a PhD in my child. So all of your training as a teacher, all of the skills that you learn only work if we partner together." And it's something I always keep in my mind as we think about this work. So thank you for all your time, your engagement today. We continue to be committed here at NAFSCE to this work. And, I encourage you to explore the resources that we have on the screen. And, I'm looking forward to the conversation, Max, as you sort of help us through questions and conversations and learning from everybody in the room. But thank you again for having me here today, because this has been great.